I can't read. Can you read it to me? The boy asked. Upon the millionaire opened it, he turned pale. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, creating long golden stripes across the polished wooden floor. Rows of books lined the walls, some old and worn, others bright and new. It was a place where most children came to explore stories of heroes, magic, and adventure. But for one small boy, the library felt more like a mountain he could never climb. The boy's name was Arjun. He was 10 years old, small for his age, with dark, curious eyes that seemed to absorb everything he saw. He had a habit of watching people from a distance, learning how they moved, how they spoke, and how they smiled. But Arjun had a secret he carried like a heavy stone in his chest. He could not read. Words on the page twisted into shapes and lines that meant nothing to him. He had tried to learn, of course, with the help of his mother and teachers, but the letters always danced away, and the sentences made no sense. It was frustrating, and it made him feel small, as if everyone else had a secret map to a world he could never enter. On that particular day, the library was especially quiet because the regular librarian had gone to lunch. In her place, there was a visitor, a man who often came to donate books to the library and to speak with the children about the importance of learning. His name was Mr. Rao. He was a millionaire, known in the city for his success in business, but also for his generosity. He had a calm, gentle presence that made people feel at ease, and he had a habit of stopping to listen to anyone who needed to talk. Arjun had watched Mr. Rao from the corner of his eye on previous visits. He had seen the way the man treated children, not with boredom or distraction, but with attention, as if each child were important, as if their words mattered. That made Arjun feel both nervous and hopeful. Today, he clutched a small envelope tightly in his hand. It was old and slightly wrinkled, the kind of envelope that seemed ordinary to anyone else, but to Arjun, it contained something important, something he hoped could change his life. He took a deep breath, his small chest rising and falling rapidly. Every step toward Mr. Rao felt heavier than the last, as if the floor itself were resisting him. Finally, he stood before the man, holding the envelope out with both hands. I can't read, he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. Can you read it to me? Mr. Rao looked down at the boy. His sharp eyes softened immediately. He knelt down slightly to be at the boy's level so he could look into those wide, honest eyes. Of course, he said. What is it? Arjun hesitated for a moment. He wanted to say so much, but the words tangled up inside his throat. He nodded quickly, as if that was enough, and handed the envelope over. The millionaire took it gently, noticing the slight tremble in Arjun's fingers. He had handled many important letters in his life, some from business partners, some from strangers seeking help. But there was something different about this one. This was not just paper and ink. It was the hope of a child who believed in something bigger than himself. As he carefully opened the envelope, Arjun watched with wide, anxious eyes. He had never felt this nervous before. His heart thumped in his chest, and he clenched his small fists to keep them from shaking. He wished he could read the words himself, wished he could prove that he could understand the message hidden inside. But he had to trust Mr. Rao, and that trust felt like stepping across a bridge with no one holding the other side. The paper inside the envelope was simple. It was not fancy or decorated, just a single sheet with words written neatly in black ink. Arjun had written it himself with the help of his older sister, who knew how to guide his hand when the letters refused to stay straight. Even though he could not read the words himself, he had imagined each sentence over and over in his mind. Each word was a small victory, each line a story of his thoughts, hopes, and dreams. Mr. Rao unfolded the paper carefully, smoothing out the creases with his large, warm hands. He began to read aloud slowly so the boy could follow along by listening. At first, the words seemed simple, almost ordinary. But as he continued, Mr. Rao's eyes widened and his expression changed. The letter was not just a note from a child. It contained a perspective, a clarity, and an insight that was rare in anyone, let alone a 10-year-old. Arjun's small shoulders tensed as he waited, trying to guess from Mr. Rao's face what the words might be. He had hoped for encouragement, maybe even a promise of help, but the look in the millionaire's eyes was something else entirely. It was surprise, mixed with something heavier, shock, awe, and a realization that he could not ignore. "Where did you learn this?" Mr. Rao asked gently, though there was a hint of disbelief in his voice. Arjun swallowed hard, unsure what to say. I heard it at home," he said slowly. I don't always understand everything, but I wanted to try, Mr. Rao nodded, still looking at the letter. He could see the boy's nervousness, his hope, his fear that maybe he had failed somehow. But he also saw courage. It took courage to ask someone to read for you, to trust that they would understand your thoughts. And it took courage to put those thoughts into writing, knowing that words could be judged, misunderstood, or ignored. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The library, with its rows of books and quiet sunlight, felt like the stage for something important. Mr. Rao put down the envelope carefully, his mind racing. He had seen many proposals, many ideas, and many dreams. But this was different. It was not polished or professional, but it had honesty. It had truth. And it had the voice of a child who believed that he could be more than the circumstances that had tried to hold him back. Arjun watched him carefully, feeling the weight of the moment. He did not understand fully why Mr. Rao's face had changed, but he felt that something significant had happened. It was as if the air itself had grown heavier, charged with possibility. He wished he could speak, could explain the thoughts that swirled inside him, but the words would not come. Finally, Mr. Rao looked up at him, and the surprise in his eyes softened into something else, something warm and thoughtful. He smiled gently. "You have a very sharp mind, Arjun," he said, using the boy's name for the first time. "Even if you cannot read yet, you see the world in a way many adults cannot." The boy's eyes brightened slightly, hope flickering in the corners of his expression. He wanted to believe him, but he had been disappointed before. He had been told he was too small, too slow, or simply not capable of understanding the world. But Mr. Rao's words felt different. They felt real. For the next few minutes, they sat together in silence, the letter resting on the table between them. The sunlight continued to stream through the window, catching dust motes that floated lazily in the air. The quiet library seemed to hold them in a protective bubble, away from the noise and doubt of the outside world. Arjun finally asked, almost in a whisper, Do you think I can do it?" Mr. Rao looked at him carefully, studying the boy's face. "I don't just think you can," he said. "I believe you will." Something inside Arjun shifted at that moment. It was not a sudden, magical change, but a small spark of confidence that began to grow. For the first time, he felt that maybe the world was not a place that would always leave him behind. Maybe with help he could reach the things he dreamed of, no matter how impossible they seemed. He left the library that day with a small but powerful hope in his chest. The envelope was gone, replaced by a promise unspoken but deeply felt. And in the quiet of the room, Mr. Rao remained seated, staring at the empty space where the boy had been, thinking about the extraordinary potential he had just glimpsed in the most unlikely place. Arjun had come seeking someone to read for him, but in truth, he had found someone who could see him. And that, he realized slowly as he walked home, was the first step toward everything he had ever wanted. The days after the library encounter passed slowly for Arjun, but he could not stop thinking about Mr. Rao and the words he had spoken. They echoed in his mind like a soft but persistent melody. "I don't just think you can, I believe you will." The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that the boy had never felt before. They planted a small seed of hope in his heart, a seed that refused to be ignored. At home, Arjun tried to focus on his usual routine, but everything seemed different now. He still struggled to read, still fumbled over letters that refused to make sense, but the thought of Mr. Rao's belief in him gave him a new determination. Instead of feeling ashamed of his difficulty, he began to imagine a future where he could read and understand the world around him. Every time he glanced at a book, he no longer saw it as a wall he could not cross, but as a mountain he might one day climb. His mother noticed a change in him almost immediately. She had always known that her son struggled, but she had never seen him so determined. "Arjun," she said one evening as they sat together in their small, crowded kitchen, "you seem different. What has happened?" Arjun hesitated. How could he explain the feeling of hope he carried? How could he describe the way a stranger's belief had made him feel like he might actually be capable of something? Finally, he said, "There's a man at the library, Mr. Rao. He believes I can do it. That I can learn." His mother smiled, a warm, tired smile that carried relief and pride. "Well, if someone believes in you, Arjun, maybe you should believe in yourself too." Encouraged, Arjun started to spend more time at the library. Each day after school, he would walk the familiar streets, clutching his small satchel, and enter the quiet sanctuary of books. Sometimes he would sit and stare at the shelves, running his fingers along the spines, imagining the worlds hidden inside. Other times, he would ask for help from the librarian or Mr. Rao if he happened to be there. Slowly, he began to realize that learning was not just about reading the words. It was about understanding the meaning behind them, about connecting ideas, and about being curious enough to ask questions. One afternoon, as Arjun carefully approached Mr. Rao, he felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had been rehearsing what he would say all day, but when he finally stood before the millionaire, the words seemed to vanish. Mr. Rao looked up from the stack of books he was sorting and smiled warmly. "Hello, Arjun," he said. "How are you today?" I brought something," Arjun said, producing a small notebook from his satchel. It was filled with messy handwriting, drawings, and notes. "I tried to write what I think about things." Mr. Rao took the notebook gently and flipped through the pages. His eyes widened slightly. The boy had written down observations about the world, small business ideas he had overheard from adults, and even sketches of inventions he had imagined. It was clear that Arjun had a mind that worked quickly, absorbing details others overlooked, and connecting them in ways that were surprising for his age. "These are incredible," Mr. Rao said finally, his voice calm but full of admiration. "How did you come up with all of this?" Arjun shrugged, a little embarrassed. I listen, I watch, I try to think. I can't read the books, but I can see things I can understand." Mr. Rao nodded thoughtfully. He had dealt with many adults who claimed to have brilliant ideas, but few had the clarity and honesty of this 10-year-old. There was no pretense in Arjun's work, no attempt to impress, just pure observation and imagination. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Rao began to mentor Arjun. Not in the way a teacher might sit with a student correcting mistakes, but in a way that encouraged curiosity and self-confidence. He would ask Arjun questions about what he observed in the world, what he thought would happen in certain situations, and how he might solve small problems. Arjun's answers were often unconventional, yet insightful, showing that his mind was not limited by the inability to read. One day, Mr. Rao handed Arjun a book. "I want you to try something," he said. "I know reading is hard for you, but start with just a few words each day. Even one sentence is enough. You can do it." Arjun took the book hesitantly. The letters still seemed to dance on the page, and he felt a familiar frustration rising in his chest. But then he remembered the look in Mr. Rao's eyes, the belief, not just in his ability to read, but in his potential. Taking a deep breath, he opened the book and focused on the first line. Slowly, carefully, he sounded out the words. It was difficult, and he stumbled many times, but he refused to give up. Days turned into weeks, and Arjun's progress was slow but steady. Each word he mastered felt like a small victory, each sentence he understood a triumph. And through it all, Mr. Rao remained patient, always encouraging, never critical. The boy began to see that learning was not a race, but a journey, and that mistakes were just steps along the path. Meanwhile, Arjun's confidence began to grow in other areas of his life as well. He started participating more in class, asking questions he had previously kept inside. He even began sharing his ideas with his friends, who were amazed by his creativity. Slowly, the boy who had once felt small and overlooked began to see himself in a new light. But it was not just learning that changed for Arjun. His relationship with Mr. Rao also deepened. The millionaire was no longer just a figure who read letters for him. He became a mentor, a guide, and a friend. They would spend hours discussing ideas, drawing sketches, and imagining possibilities. Mr. Rao would often share stories from his own childhood, the struggles he faced, and the lessons he learned along the way. Arjun listened intently, soaking up every word, and realizing that even great people had once been small, uncertain, and unsure of themselves. One afternoon, as they sat together in the library, Arjun handed Mr. Rao a new notebook. "I tried to write about my ideas for a business," he said shyly. Mr. Rao opened it and began to read. As he progressed through the pages, his expression changed. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, deep in thought. The ideas were simple, yet practical and clever. They were not fully formed plans, but they had potential, ideas that could grow into something meaningful if nurtured. Arjun watched anxiously, afraid that Mr. Rao might dismiss them, as adults often did with children's ideas. But the millionaire looked at him with a calm, steady gaze and said, "These are remarkable, Arjun. You have a natural talent for seeing opportunities where others cannot. With practice, you could achieve anything you set your mind to. The boy's heart swelled with pride and excitement. For the first time, he felt that his thoughts mattered, that his voice could be heard, and that his dreams were valid. It was a feeling he had never experienced before, and it motivated him to work even harder. Over the next months, Arjun continued to learn and grow under Mr. Rao's guidance. He practiced reading every day, worked on his ideas, and developed skills he had never thought possible. And with each small success, he felt a little braver, a little stronger, and a little more capable of facing the world. The library, once a place that had intimidated him, became a sanctuary, a place of discovery, imagination, and growth. And at the center of it all was Mr. Rao, a man who had seen beyond the boy's inability to read and recognized the potential hidden within him. Arjun's journey was far from over, but the first steps had been taken. He had learned that belief could be transformative, that guidance could open doors, and that even the smallest spark of hope could grow into a flame capable of lighting the way forward. And as he left the library that day, clutching his notebook filled with new ideas and observations, he felt a sense of possibility he had never known before. For Arjun, the world was no longer a place of limits and barriers. It was a place of opportunity, waiting for him to explore, learn, and grow. Arjun's days had begun to follow a rhythm of discovery. Each morning he would wake early, his mind alive with new ideas and questions. He had begun to see the world differently. Where once he had noticed only obstacles, his inability to read, his small stature, his quietness, he now saw possibilities, pathways, and opportunities. He carried a small notebook wherever he went, jotting down observations, thoughts, and even questions that popped into his head. His life had become a journey of curiosity and imagination, guided by the quiet, steady hand of Mr. Rao. One bright morning, Arjun arrived at the library with more excitement than usual. He had spent the previous evening drawing diagrams and writing notes about a project he hoped to share with Mr. Rao. It was an idea inspired by something he had seen in his neighborhood, people struggling to carry groceries long distances. Arjun had sketched a small, portable cart with clever compartments and wheels designed to make transport easier for children and the elderly alike. When he entered the library, he found Mr. Rao seated at his usual corner table, reviewing a pile of letters. The millionaire looked up as Arjun approached, his face lighting up with a welcoming smile. "Good morning, Arjun," Mr. Rao said. "What have you brought today?" The boy's hands trembled slightly as he placed his notebook on the table. I have a new idea," he said. "I think it could help people in my neighborhood." Mr. Rao leaned forward, curiosity evident in his eyes. He opened the notebook and began to study the sketches. As he turned the pages, he saw not only the drawings but also the careful notes Arjun had made about materials, measurements, and how the cart might be used. The boy's mind, though young, had a precision and logic that impressed him. "These are excellent, Arjun," Mr. Rao said finally. "But tell me, how did you think of this?" Arjun looked down at his shoes, then back at Mr. Rao, his voice soft but steady. "I see people struggling," he said. "They try to carry too much and it's hard. I thought maybe I could make it easier." Mr. Rao nodded thoughtfully. "You have a remarkable way of noticing problems and thinking of solutions. That is a very rare talent, even among adults." The boy felt a rush of pride, mixed with a quiet nervousness. He had never been praised for his thoughts before. Usually, adults focused on what he could not do, his inability to read quickly, his mistakes in school. But here was someone who saw what he could do, and that recognition filled him with both confidence and responsibility. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Rao decided it was time to introduce Arjun to something more challenging. He began involving the boy in real-life problem-solving exercises. They would take walks through the city, observing how markets worked, how people carried goods, and how children navigated the streets. Arjun would take notes, sketch diagrams, and suggest improvements. Mr. Rao listened carefully, asking questions that encouraged critical thinking and sometimes challenging Arjun to consider the consequences of his ideas. One afternoon, as they walked through a crowded street market, Arjun noticed a group of children trying to carry heavy baskets of vegetables home. He immediately pulled Mr. Rao aside and whispered, "Look, they are struggling. Maybe the cart could help them." Mr. Rao smiled. "Why don't we test your idea?" he suggested. Excited but nervous, Arjun ran to gather some old boxes and a small wooden frame from nearby stalls. With Mr. Rao's guidance, he assembled a makeshift version of his cart. The children watched with curiosity as Arjun explained how it worked and encouraged them to try it. Slowly, carefully, they loaded the baskets onto the cart and pushed it along the street. Their faces lit up with surprise and joy as they realized how much easier it was. Arjun's heart swelled with pride. For the first time, he saw his idea making a tangible difference in the lives of others. Mr. Rao, standing beside him, gave a small nod of approval. "See, Arjun, your thoughts can change the world even in small ways. This is the power of ideas." The boy beamed. That moment stayed with him, a memory he would carry forever. He realized that the world was full of problems waiting for solutions, and that even someone as small as he could make an impact. But as much as Arjun was learning and growing, he still carried the lingering challenge of reading. It remained difficult, a mountain that demanded daily effort. Some days were discouraging. Words seemed to twist and dance more than ever, and frustration often bubbled to the surface. On those days, Arjun would come to the library with a heavy heart, unsure if he could continue. Mr. Rao noticed these struggles and never chastised him. Instead, he would quietly sit beside Arjun, guiding his hand as he sounded out letters and patiently explaining meanings. "Progress is not always straight," Mr. Rao said one day. "Sometimes we stumble backward before we leap forward. But each step, even the small ones, is important." Arjun learned to accept that it was okay to struggle. He realized that mistakes were not failures, they were lessons. Slowly, the once impossible words began to make sense. Sentences started to form in his mind like bridges connecting ideas he could finally understand. Each new word he read was like discovering a secret passage into a world he had long been denied. Then came the day when Mr. Rao handed Arjun a different kind of letter. It was addressed to him, not from a friend or family member, but from a distant relative who had just returned from another city. The handwriting was neat and formal, filled with words that Arjun recognized only partially. His chest tightened with anxiety. I can't read it," he admitted softly. "Can you?" Mr. Rao smiled gently. "Of course," he said, breaking the envelope open and reading aloud. As the words flowed, Arjun listened carefully. The letter contained news of opportunities, challenges, and requests for his family. He heard details that filled him with both hope and concern. When Mr. Rao paused and looked up, the boy saw the change in his expression. He turned pale, as if the words had revealed something he had not expected. Arjun's curiosity flared. What is it?" he asked. "Mr." Rao swallowed and shook his head slightly, trying to maintain his composure. "It's surprising," he said slowly. "This letter, it contains information that could change many things, but it also shows how much potential you have, Arjun. You've already begun to understand more than most adults would in this situation." The boy's heart pounded. He did not fully understand what Mr. Rao meant, but he could sense the weight of the moment. Something important was unfolding, and for the first time, he felt that he was standing on the edge of something much larger than himself. In the following days, Mr. Rao guided Arjun through the process of understanding the letter, helping him decode the meaning behind words and phrases he could barely read. They discussed the implications, what actions could be taken, and how small steps might lead to bigger changes. Arjun listened intently, realizing that the knowledge contained in the letter was powerful, and that he had a role to play in shaping what came next. As they worked together, a new bond grew between them, not just of mentor and student, but of trust and shared purpose. Arjun saw that intelligence and insight were not measured by the ability to read alone, but by the courage to ask questions, the patience to learn, and the willingness to act thoughtfully. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Arjun and Mr. Rao sat in the library, reflecting on everything that had happened. Arjun looked at the millionaire and asked, "Do you think I can really do something important, Mr.?" Rao's eyes softened. "You already are Arjun," he said. "Every idea, every effort, every small victory, you are building the path to something great. And remember, greatness is not always measured by fame or wealth, but by the difference you make in the lives of others." Arjun smiled, a quiet, determined smile. He understood now that his journey was not about racing against others, but about growing, learning, and using what he had to help those around him. The struggles with reading, the moments of doubt, and the challenges he faced were all part of the journey. Each day brought a new lesson, a new opportunity, and a new step forward. As he closed his notebook that evening and walked home through the quiet streets, he felt a sense of purpose unlike anything he had known before. The city, once overwhelming and full of obstacles, now seemed alive with possibilities. And in his heart, he carried the knowledge that with patience, effort, and the support of someone who believed in him, he could face any challenge and make a real difference. The days ahead promised growth, discovery, and new challenges, but Arjun was ready. He had learned that belief in oneself, guided by the wisdom and encouragement of another, could transform even the most ordinary life into something extraordinary. And he was determined to continue, no matter what obstacles came his way. The day Arjun had been waiting for had finally arrived. The city was buzzing as usual, but for him it felt different, charged with a quiet sense of anticipation. He clutched his notebook tightly, the pages filled with sketches, notes, and ideas that had grown over the past months. Today, he would see Mr. Rao and discuss something that could change everything. Something that had been quietly building, waiting for the right moment. When he arrived at the library, Mr. Rao was already there, seated at the corner table, reviewing papers. The man looked up as Arjun approached, his expression calm but unreadable. There was a seriousness in his eyes that made Arjun's heart beat faster. He had learned that Mr. Rao did not often show surprise without reason, and now he felt that something important was about to happen. "Good morning, Arjun," Mr. Rao said, his voice gentle yet commanding attention. "I've been thinking a lot about your ideas and your progress. There's something we need to discuss today." Arjun nodded, a mixture of excitement and nervousness stirring inside him. He placed his notebook on the table and waited. The library, with its tall windows and rows of books, seemed to shrink around them, as if the world had focused on this single moment. Mr. Rao reached for a small envelope, the same one he had opened weeks ago when Arjun first asked him to read it. He had read it carefully many times, considering every word, every detail. But today he intended to share with Arjun the full meaning of what it contained. He unfolded the letter slowly, his eyes scanning the words once more. Then he looked up at the boy. "Arjun," he said carefully, "this letter, it contains information about something very important, something that affects many people and also shows the impact your ideas could have." Arjun's stomach twisted with curiosity. He had learned to control his impatience, but now it was nearly impossible. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Rao leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. "It's a business opportunity, a problem that many adults have tried to solve but could not. The letter describes the situation in detail, and it's clear that someone with fresh ideas, someone who can see the world differently, could make a real difference." Arjun's eyes widened. He tried to imagine what Mr. Rao meant. Could it be something he had already thought about? Could it be one of the ideas he had written in his notebook? His heart raced. "You have been learning, observing, and thinking about problems in ways that most adults cannot, Mr. Rao continued. This is why I want you to understand this fully. The world does not always give opportunities to those who are young or to those who cannot yet read as well as others. But knowledge, curiosity, and courage can open doors even when they seem closed." Arjun listened intently, hanging on every word. He realized that what had started as a simple request for help reading a letter had now grown into something far bigger than he had imagined. He was not just a boy struggling to read. He was a thinker, a problem solver, and someone capable of making a difference. Mr. Rao handed the letter to Arjun, carefully guiding his hand as he began to sound out the words. It was difficult at first. The sentences were long and some of the words were new, but Arjun had learned patience. He took his time, slowly forming the words in his mind. With each sentence, the meaning became clearer and the boy's understanding deepened. As he progressed, a quiet astonishment filled him. The letter described a challenge in the city's market system, a problem that many adults had overlooked. It detailed inefficiencies, struggles, and opportunities for improvement. And as Arjun read, he realized that his own ideas, the sketches and notes he had carefully crafted over the months, could offer real solutions. He looked up at Mr. Rao, his eyes wide with both excitement and uncertainty. I can help," he asked. "Mr. Rao smiled, a mixture of pride and seriousness. "Yes, Arjun, you can, but it will require effort, patience, and careful planning. Your ideas are valuable, but they need to be developed, tested, and shared, and I will be here to guide you every step of the way." For the first time, Arjun felt the weight of responsibility settle on his small shoulders. He was no longer just a boy learning to read. He was someone who could take action, someone whose thoughts could change the lives of many people. The realization was thrilling, but also a little intimidating. Over the following weeks, Arjun and Mr. Rao worked closely together. They visited markets, spoke with vendors, and studied the ways people carried goods, managed inventory, and interacted with customers. Arjun took meticulous notes, sketched diagrams, and suggested improvements. His insights were practical yet creative, showing a depth of understanding that amazed Mr. Rao. One afternoon, as they observed a busy market, Arjun noticed a group of children struggling to carry baskets of vegetables and fruits. He immediately sketched a small, improved version of his cart in his notebook. "This could help them," he said eagerly. Mr. Rao nodded. "Let's test it." Together, they built a prototype using lightweight materials. The children were hesitant at first, but soon their faces lit up as they realized how much easier it was to transport their goods. Arjun's heart swelled with pride. He had seen his idea making a tangible difference in the lives of others. It was a moment he would never forget, a moment that proved to him that effort, observation, and creativity could indeed change the world. As the weeks turned into months, Arjun continued to grow. He practiced reading every day, slowly mastering more complex words and sentences. His confidence blossomed, not just in his ability to read, but in his ability to think, solve problems, and act. The boy who had once felt small and overlooked had become someone whose thoughts and actions mattered. Then came the day when Mr. Rao invited Arjun to a small meeting with some business advisors and community leaders. The boy's heart pounded as he entered the room. He was no longer a child simply learning to read. He was a participant in a conversation about real change, about solutions that could benefit many people. He presented his ideas clearly and confidently, using sketches and explanations he had practiced countless times in his notebook. The adults listened intently, asking questions and seeking clarifications. Arjun responded with thoughtful answers, drawing on his observations, experiments, and imagination. By the end of the meeting, the room was filled with quiet admiration. The advisors and leaders nodded in approval, impressed by the boy's clarity, insight, and determination. Mr. Rao looked on with pride, knowing that Arjun had not only grown in knowledge but in courage, confidence, and the ability to inspire others. That evening, as they walked home, Arjun's mind was alive with excitement. He realized that the journey that had begun with a simple request, "I can't read, can you read it to me?" had transformed his life. He had learned that limitations could be overcome, that curiosity and observation were powerful tools, and that belief, both in oneself and from others, could open doors to opportunities previously unimaginable. At home, Arjun shared the day's experiences with his mother. She listened with wide eyes, tears of pride forming at the corners of her own. She had always believed in her son, but now she could see the extraordinary journey he had undertaken, guided by determination, courage, and the mentorship of a man who had recognized his potential. The following months were filled with continued learning, experimentation, and growth. Arjun's reading improved steadily, and his ideas were implemented in small pilot programs throughout the community. Each success reinforced his confidence, teaching him that even a child could make a meaningful difference when guided by curiosity, effort, and the belief of those who saw potential. And then, one quiet afternoon, Mr. Rao handed Arjun a small certificate, a symbol of his journey, his growth, and his achievements. It was not just a piece of paper, it was a recognition of the boy's courage, perseverance, and brilliance. Arjun held it carefully, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. "Arjun, Mr. Rao said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "You have shown that the greatest strength lies not in what you can do alone, but in your willingness to learn, to observe, and to act. You have a future filled with possibilities, and this is only the beginning." The boy smiled, a quiet, radiant smile that spoke of hope, determination, and a newfound understanding of his own potential. He had started with a simple request for help, and he had ended with a life transformed. A life filled with learning, opportunities, and the knowledge that he could face any challenge with courage and creativity. Arjun had learned the most important lesson of all, that belief, patience, and action could turn even the smallest spark into a flame capable of illuminating the world. And as he looked toward the future, he felt ready to step into it, not as a boy who struggled to read, but as someone who could dream, learn, and make a real difference. The library, the mentor, the notebooks, and the countless hours of practice had all combined to create a story of transformation, a story that would stay with Arjun for the rest of his life. And in the quiet of that evening, as the sun set and cast long shadows across the streets, he felt a quiet joy, knowing that the journey he had begun was only just beginning, and that the world awaited the ideas, courage, and heart of a boy who had once simply asked someone to read for him.